So the purpose of this spec, let me do it first. Actually, the first session I've had in this room, so I haven't joined it yet. There we go. Great. So, I guess I'll start with a history lesson about why we have backports, where they came from. Don't sit all the way in the back. Come on up. Small group.
You run away.
What's that?
You run away.
No, he's gonna close the door. Just pull it really
Just
hard.
pull, it makes a really loud noise, but then it closes.
Yeah. So, back when Ubuntu first started, before I used it, Backports was completely unrelated to the official Ubuntu project. Just if you go on the source code, you can still find the prototype, the antecedent Backports project there when it was started. And it was kind of out of control because the people who were doing it didn't really understand about what they were doing to people when they were backporting stuff. And so, this is all before my involvement, there came a point where there's like, okay, we will bring you in and make you an official part of the Ubuntu project, but there's going to be some rules. And so the tech board laid out some guidelines for what Backports is for, what it's not for, and how things are supposed to work. Anyway, right, so in general, the way the process works for people who may not be familiar with it is we have a separate Launchpad project for each release, and there's whatever the meta project thing is for Ubuntu Backports. And really all it is a bug tracker. And then we have a team called it the Ubuntu Backporters, who are the people who review and approve Backports. And so somebody files a bug that says, hey, I'd like to add this backport. Somebody who may be the same person tests the package they want backported with the diff, if any, needed to backport. We really want to minimize diff from what's in the development release, bring it back. And then once it's tested, it's reviewed by an Ubuntu backporter that says, yes, this meets the criteria for backported packages, and it's been properly tested, and then it gets pushed. If it's a no change backport, there's a script that the archive admins who have shell access to the data center, basically in terms of active people, everyone but me, have a script they can run that then does an automatic no change backport into the earlier release. In the case of a backport that requires changes package, then any Ubuntu developer can upload the package.
Presumably in that release.
Upload. I'm sorry?
Presumably in that release.
Well, no, right. But so if you're Motu, I think this has changed over time. You can upload to any package that was in universe in that release. If it moved to main later, it's not a problem. And then any archive admin can review and accept the backport. I can do that part. And so we prefer the no change backports from a reliability, security, traceability perspective. The fact that it's all done within the build, within the build system, doesn't ever touch a developer machine. In general, that's better. But if changes are needed, then changes are needed, and those have to be uploaded. And then it builds in backports at a low priority, mind you, but then it'll be available in release tech backports. So that's the general process. The testing standard is that it build, install, and run. If it starts, that's enough. Now that sounds like a very low standard. In practice, it actually works very well. If you have a package that's working in a later release and you backport it if there's going to be a problem, it will usually become apparent almost right away. And so then there are the question of what packages are eligible for backporting. In general, it's just leaf packages, not libraries, things with reverse dependencies, things like that. And we backport for features. We need to be very careful not to use backports to substitute for the SRU process. Now, then that can get a little fuzzy sometimes because there may be a package in Universe that it would be very complex to find the patch, and if you don't put it in backports, nobody will get it. But part of the reason is people get updates by default, all users get it. Backports you have to opt into, so if you fix a bug via backports, you're only helping a fraction of the users, not everyone. And so those are the sort of the general rules, and we do have made exceptions to the no libraries rule, or not think with reverse dependencies, but then more testing is required. You actually have to test the reverse dependencies, make sure they actually work well and are compatible, and which ones have to be backported as well, or maybe the one that's there is fine, but you do have to test them all. There have been times when I have said, oh, that has a lot of reverse dependencies, we'll test a sampling of the reverse dependencies. That's never gone well for me.
You just said right, dependencies, and what was wrong?
Well, so in the particular case in question was in Hardy, released with I think Subversion 1.4, and Subversion 1.5 came out right afterwards, and there was issues with compatibilities of repositories. And so it's like, okay, we need to get 1.5 into backports so that Hardy users can have a way to get 1.5 and have access to 1.5 repositories. Subversion has a huge number of reverse dependencies. And given the urgency that there were users that couldn't connect to repositories, I said, okay, well, we'll test a sampling of the reverse dependencies. Every one we tested was fine. A large fraction of the ones we didn't were not.
Right.
And so we ended up breaking people who didn't, and then having to sort of do an emergency mass backport with the ones that didn't work. And so I prefer not to do it that way again. And one thing that is different from, say, Debian backports is like if I do a lot of the ClamAV maintenance in Ubuntu, and I work with the Debian people who do it in Debian, and if I want to put ClamAV in backports or volatile in Debian, I can just put ClamAV in, and that's ClamAV with a C. I maintain ClamAV with a K in Debian. And when a user installs ClamAV from volatile backports, and it doesn't work with the stable ClamAV with a K because the library changed, and whoever did the backport didn't worry about the reverse dependencies, for me as the ClamAV maintainer, it's not a bug.
Right.
Whereas here, if there are reverse dependencies involved, we require that those be made to continue to work. Now, part of that is because when you enable backports, you get everything in backports. So we have to. But I also think that's a necessity at the moment because of that unfortunate condition. But in general, I think that's a good policy. So that's, let's see, then the other thing I should mention is the requirement to be in Ubuntu backporter is to be Motu, or obviously Cordet. But so most of the people, large fraction of the people in the room here, could be in a Ubuntu backporter if they care to. So that's sort of my spiel. And then I guess the other thing I say is, right now, the biggest problem we have is that those of us who are in Ubuntu backporters don't have a lot of time for it. And so we need people who want to be involved and work on it. At one point a few years ago, there was an active backporters testing team that would take backport requests and test them and push them up to the backporters who would then review and approve them. That doesn't exist really anymore at all.
How many requests do you get, like, monthly for things to backport?
It varies. Let me just take a look. It's been a while since I've actually looked.
And when you backport something, for example, to Yanti, do you have to backport it also to Karmic, so there is a
Yes,
upgrade
yes,
path?
yes. That's if you're skipping releases, you need to provide an upgrade path.
Right.
Now, but for example, if you backport to Hardy, that means you don't also have to backport to Lucid and Maverick. You don't have to touch Karmic because the path from Hardy doesn't include Karmic.
Well,
Anymore.
If you,
Right, anymore.
if you, so if you,
We can only say that now that Intrepid's dead.
Right, but it's been dead for a long time. So.
and if you backport something to Lucid, and let's say we are already in NATI, if you backport something to Lucid, do you have to also backport it into Maverick?
Yes.
And then into NATI, and then into as long as I
Well,
can.
no, because when
as
you
long
do a
as I-
backport, so we're developing Natty right now.
Right.
And when you do a backport, you backport from your current development
No, I-
release. So there's
yes, I
there's
know.
no point backporting
It's-
Natty to Natty.
No, yes,
Okay.
what I'm
Right.
saying is, do you have to keep both upgrade paths for LTS?
Yes, up until the point where there will come a point before the next LTS is
Yes, I
released
know.
when Maverick will go away.
Right.
That's when that requirement
So
goes away.
up until this
Yes.
point, you have to keep both paths.
Yes, because right now the only upgrade path, the only upgrade path to Natty ever will be through Maverick.
Right.
So we have to support that.
I wonder how that's going to work, but that's for another session, I guess, because Maverick will be EOL like 3 weeks before. the next
Right,
session.
and I mean, we can talk about that because the
They've
same
been
thing happens
EOL
every
on-
time.
I mean, they've been generally holding off on the EOL until after the release.
Yeah, those support those are minimums and they usually land somewhere after. But still, yeah, so up until that EOL, then you have to support the full upgrade path.
Let's see.
Right, so right now there's 7 Maverick backports requests already that are unprocessed. They're all new, untested. I haven't opened the bugs. There have been several that have been processed already, but so, but part of the thing is there hasn't been a lot of, basically the problem with the Ubuntu backport is not having enough time is not new. And so we haven't been very responsive, so a lot of people are using backports than used to. Also with PPAs, so the incentive to actually do an official backport is less. And so part of what we need to do, I kind of think success will breed more requests.
Right.
And so if we can expand the team and requests are getting made quickly, then you can process quickly, there's not a lot of latency associated with it, then I think you will find that more people are,
Requesting backwards.
yeah.
So it's a never-ending cycle. You get
Yeah.
more people to request, you need more people to backward.
Right.
Then you get more people
Yeah,
to backward.
to answer the question, yeah, there's a separate session about that, and the problem is it needs some non-trivial changes in apt to do it. And that's certainly it would be the preference to have it so that you would only get packages you explicitly pulled from backports. The problem that we're trying to fix is currently, if you set the repository up to not automatically bring all the backports in, you can then, it's not that hard to install the package you want. But then if that package needs dependencies from backports, it will fail.
Right.
And it's,
With aptitude, right? Is that true?
I don't believe that's true, but
I thought
So we should.
Maybe a little bit of a moot point these days after you got pulled from the default seed.
But it's really a problem if we wait. Actually, package.
Right,
Actually, once
right,
it's
but-
packaged,
but
we can raise
given
dependency
the-
and-
given the target audience,
right.
it's really about the underlying app libraries that are used by the GUI package managers, and none of them really support it at this point, because they're all based on the app resolver. So this is
So do we have to backport from developer release, or can it happen for any release?
it can happen from any release, any later release, but it's got to be an official Ubuntu archive. You can't backport from Debian experimental. You can't backport from a PPA. It's got to be out already in the Ubuntu archive somewhere. The other thing that goes with that is we can backport new packages that are not in the release that you're backporting to. We love those because the regression risk is 0.
Right.
Now, that does have an extra step though, because that package doesn't exist in that release. It'll hit new.
Just a new.
And so there is some added latency for the new review. Now the source new is trivial. because it's already been through that once. But then it has to go through binary new, and the archive admin does have to give it the binary new review to make sure it's built correctly in that environment. So that
Can you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. When I have time.
Well, obviously.
Yeah.
So have the tools been evolved at all to deal with PPAs and stuff like that? I know that like preview and stuff like that was always a.
I don't know.
Okay.
See, one of the see, I've never used preview.
Neither have I.
Yeah. And we just. Give me just 1 second here. Right, so that's, I guess, the background. Then, some of you are here because you're interested in becoming Ubuntu backporters. And I guess I should talk about that. There isn't any sort of qualification requirement for that. There's no rules. Kind of the way I've been doing it with people when they wanted to be involved was, okay, here's the requirements for approving backports bugs. Go review them. And feel free to tell people, hey, this needs testing, this isn't appropriate because of X, et cetera, et cetera. But then if you think you have one that should be approved, just point me at it, I'll review it and approve it. And then once you've done a couple of those and it goes well, bang, I'll add it to the team. It's not, there's no bureaucracy associated with it. Just a question of making sure people understand what it is we're trying to accomplish. So that's what there is on that.
Seems like it would be nice if we could evolve Preview to deal with PPAs, because that would make it easier from a testing standpoint, because you don't have to go and build it yourself.
Right, right.
And I think that whenever I've tested backports, that's always been the highest lead time.
Right, and so yeah, I think that's
It's a really good question.
okay. Tony, so extrasubuntu.com is really for it's not for this session, but the point is it is focused on a very narrow class of application. It's not really, most of what's in the archive isn't relevant to what can go in extras. And so if
I
stuff
actually thought about extras first time I heard about it as a way to get packages that are only temporary. Something, for example, someone gave a good
Right.
example. For example,
Right.
before matches, people would create applications that I don't know display something.
Right. So Benjamin, I mean, what I usually do is just use the reverse build depends in Ubuntu DevTools, and then that will give you the. No, that's sorry, wrong question. You actually have to test reverse build depends, check for reverse build depends as well. We can talk about that later, as far as how you find the artifacts. Right. So anyway, back to the question. I think extras is for a very specific purpose. Backports is more general. The thing about PPAs is they aren't part of the official Ubuntu archive. Most PPAs are uploaded to by people who are not Ubuntu developers, and so personally, I won't install binaries from an untrusted source. Now, some people worry about such things than others, and they're welcome to manage their systems how they choose to. But so the difference between a PPA and backports is there's an Ubuntu archive trust boundary. And for somebody who worries about like server team stuff, discussions about that become really important. It's because the Ubuntu backports is inside the Ubuntu trust boundary in a way that PPAs aren't and can't be. Unless you happen to have a PPA that the only people who have access to it are also Ubuntu developers, then it's effectively the same thing, but that's not most PPAs. And trying to explain the difference between the two and how you figure out if it's one of those or not is non-trivial. So, Tony, does that answer your question? Okay, so that's my spiel, and I guess I'd like to hear questions, comments, thoughts from you all.
So I like Backports because if I have, say that I want the later version of a package, and you have 5 different PPAs which all have this one, and I guess that choosing the one from Backports would give me the best one. From a user perspective, that's why Backports should be there in the first place, right?
Right. I mean, yeah, I mean, first of all, Backports predates PPAs. So,
yeah.
So the thing is, PPAs are a launchpad capability that aren't really formally part of Ubuntu. They're on Ubuntu, not part of Ubuntu. Backports is part of Ubuntu. And so, in terms of what you're looking for, it's a different, you know, it's in a different place in the hierarchy of things. And so, you know, I'm not saying that there may not be a PPA where somebody may not have fixed bugs and improved packages and made it better, but as a class of places to look for, this should be a more official place to look. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, I've yet to run across such a PPA, but it may exist.
What?
Oh, I was saying, you know, there could be a PPA where whoever is running the PPA has significantly improved the package to make it better than what's in the archive.
Mm-hmm.
That could happen, I've just never actually seen it.
Right.
My usual interaction with PPAs, with people who run PPAs is, hey, this package is in Backports, or I'm in a team that has an official PPA, and I'm getting bugs because your PPA is breaking stuff, don't put that package in your PPA, is my primary interaction with PPA owners. It doesn't come up that much, but that's usually what it is.
Right. So, let me get my thoughts straight here. Oh, just move on. I might figure out what I'm thinking of a little bit later.
So the good thing about Backports is that it comes from the development team, right?
Right, exactly.
Which gives you some measure of trust that it's going to not harm your system, I suppose.
Right.
So kind of the reason that I'm interested in Backports is because of this PPA thing, right? I've seen these days a lot of upstreams running their own backporting PPAs,
Mm-hmm.
and I would love it if they would instead use the proper backporting process to do that.
Right.
So I'm wondering if there's a way that we could make this more attractive to upstreams.
Right, so the problem they'll have with that is there's always going to be a non-zero latency associated with the Backports process. Because first you got to get into the development release, and then you have to get Backport approved. Now that latency can be very low. I mean, I met somebody at breakfast this morning who had a problem, he needed a Backport, and it's done already. You know, it doesn't have to take a long time.
Right, after all, some upstreams have
Right.
good contact with
Right.
developers.
Now, the other problem we have is, if it's a month before the release of the next development release, there isn't a path currently into Backports for new versions.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's one where I would be willing to take on going to the tech board and say, look, we want Backports to be this continual flow of new capability. There's a period in time where the fact that we only backport from the Ubuntu development release is a barrier to that. And so, would it make sense to have I'll call it a blessed PPA, where only Ubuntu developers can upload to it, you know, with for that period. And then the thing that would go with that is the developer that uploads it then also makes a commitment to get it in the next development release when it comes. So you've got, you know, a transient problem there, but you've got a way to close it back out. Much like we have a rule that SRUs have to go into the development release before we do the SRU. But right after release, when the development release isn't open yet, you can't do that, so we make an exception. This is a similar sort of thought, but it's a little longer
I
time frame.
think Colin actually developed a process around that recently, that SRUs, that if the development release has the same version as the previous release, the SRU automatically gets copied to the new
Not
development.
automatically.
Yeah,
It is automatic.
No, I think it's automatic now.
Yes.
yeah, that's our recent.
Yeah, I think like last week or two.
Right.
I
So,
see.
yeah, so why don't we just do away with the PPA requirement and then in freeze time allow you to upload to Backports, and then everything which is greater in
Ah,
Backports is
right.
copied at release?
Right, because the
The
backport
version,
pocket,
the version number mangling wouldn't work out exactly. the way
but
we
the thing
want.
is, if it's a direct upload,
Then
To
you have the same
Backports,
version.
You upload it to Backports with the
like for
incorrect
example,
version.
right. So right now, if once we're past feature freeze and natty, if there's something that people want backported in early release, I do a direct upload to natty backports.
Without the tilde tag?
No, with the tilde tag.
Oh, to natty.
Backports.
Yeah, it worked.
I see.
So we open natty Backports at feature freeze, and then we can backport from that into.
Yeah,
That could
and,
work.
and,
Yeah.
That could work.
and just have to make sure, right, and then those packages,
And
we
basically
need
open
something
up-
similar, but then those packages then could be copied into the develop release.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Basically
I might
open
do it
the
without the tilde tag as well, because if they're gonna be copied into the development.
If they get copied directly, then that's
it.
I mean, we could,
Yes,
if we could convince the admins to establish a policy that in addition to like SRUs getting automatically copied into development release, that, you know, untagged backports or something like that in a release time get copied.
Yeah.
That could be a slightly tough sell, but only
No,
slightly.
I think that's actually much better than the PPA idea, though.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
And, I mean, I don't know when the backports pocket actually begins to exist.
Well, I think it exists when, I think natties exist now.
Right, I'm pretty sure it does. So that's an interesting idea.
Yeah, that's the question. Would it technically work? It should.
It would go through binary. It would go through sorts and binary in the same way that
It should
that
just
any
work.
other backport
Yeah,
does.
if it's an updated version of a new package, it would just go in, and if it is a new package, it would hit new. Just like if you do a source backport that doesn't exist at the previous release, it hits new there.
But we
So
already
it
have a
should just
process
work.
for that, so that's
Right.
fine. It does look like natty backports proposed security and updates do already
Right,
exist.
I mean, I
I think they get created.
I knew updates existed pre-release, I had never checked on the others. But so yeah, Andrew, it should just work.
What's the policy for this then? Any developer can just upload to Backports if they want after
No,
feature freeze?
Ubuntu backports would have to approve it.
Okay.
And then we could build team policy around how to deal with such requests.
Yeah, sure.
And then that would,
It's also a way, of not having to stage your uploads kind of locally before, and then remember to upload them with the next release.
right, exactly. Right, and it stays inside the trust boundary all the time, and so that's also,
I guess there might potentially be one question of when those packages get pocket copied over to the next development release.
When the archive
But I guess-
opens for the release.
Yeah, I
right,
guess
just
so.
like you do with the SRUs.
Okay.
But, yeah, this is a conversation to have with archive admins, I guess, and possibly tech board, I don't know.
Yeah, no, this is something that would have to go to the tech board, I think. But it's good it's not Friday we're having this discussion, so I can maybe talk to some of them.
Scott, I have a quick comment. When talking to upstreams that do want to Ubuntu talking about the PPA problem, whatever, I do make it clear that the PPA is the quick and dirty way, and if you want less work and do it right for the long term, that you're going to do.
Right, but so the problem we're trying to solve though is after feature freeze,
Right.
then it's
Right. No, I'm just trying to
Yeah,
tell you
yeah.
that when it comes to talking to upstreams, I'm trying to communicate to
Right.
them.
right.
Right.
And so there's probably a certain amount of pain they're willing to accept to do it right.
Right.
And so what we need to work on is lowering the pain threshold to something that is
Right.
acceptable.
Yeah.
But there's a separate issue that we have that's unrelated to the process stuff about, for archive admins who are all busy people,
Right.
processing backports is the last thing to do.
Right.
So we have backports that are sat in there, are been in queue for a long time, and that's another source of latency.
Yeah, I'm just saying when you need to get to the point to talk to upstreams on whatever it is you fix, I can start getting that message out. So I tell them, look, if you want it out quick and dirty, do a PPA, but do come back and get stuff in there the right way and in Debian.
I think that one thing that could really help the backports, I think there are actually a fair amount of room for building tools around the backports process that exist right now.
Absolutely, I am completely in favor of that. I need somebody to do it. Who might that be?
I probably have some time.
Okay, there we go. Excellent. You're in charge of tools for backports.
Oh boy.
Document for this session.
Yeah.
I mean, so I guess let's see. What I would want something that. What do I want? As a backporter, I want something, ideally something that could like walk bug requests and try to automatically generate the backports and PPAs.
Ah, that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
And especially, I mean, it seems like certainly most of the open bugs at the moment are fairly good about following the sort of standard form of.
Right. And you know, if we had something like request sync
For backports.
for backports, it would backport sync or something. I don't know
We
what
could
to call
force-
it.
we could
But
force
the thing
it
is,
into a particular format.
then people would use that, and you would get the bug in a standard format that you could parse. The other thing that goes with that I didn't say earlier is one problem I often see in backports bugs is they just say backport package foo from natty. Well, the thing is, I don't, and then somebody say, oh, I tested it and it worked. And I look at it 2 weeks later, it's not always clear what version they tested versus what version's in the archive now. And so one thing to be very mindful of when looking at backports bugs is people need to make give specificity about what version revision they're requesting and has been tested, so that then if it's changed, you can say, oops, sorry, you tested the last version, we need to test this one again, which is...
I think another thing that would be really nice, and this is a larger task that I'm definitely not volunteering to do, is monitoring backports for subsequent SRUs.
Right, yes. Usually, most SRUs, I think, are really cherry picked from upstream, and so we probably have them in backports.
Well, but if we backport a particular version and that version then gets SRU.
Right, sure, that happens. Security support is a bigger issue. Because, and we don't have tools in place to monitor for, oh gee, that version in a later release got a security update. We should backport that. That would be a very useful tool set to have, because those backports, I'll just do them. If it happens to be the same version plus a security update that made it through the security team process for the later release.
There's no reason to.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's a good point, and that would be useful to have some tools around understanding when those things happen, so we can deal with that.
Duh. Something just crashed Safari. What did you do?
Safari? Good God.
You can sit over on this side if you want.
Yeah, I know, I'm the heathen.
I wonder if that's some type of feed something we could feed into Harvest or one of the other.
No, it's a separate issue, because other than people who are worrying about backports, nobody's going to care. And so to put it into a more general tool set will just be it will be confusing in that context, and the additional people that it would be exposed to, it won't help.
So like the backporters report on Ubuntu Wire would be better.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm curious that you're here so I'm curious where your interest comes from this.
My interest is mostly, I've only been a Canonical for a week.
Oh, okay.
And my interest is, I'm running into issues where customers need software that's not quite yet in the distribution LPS releases that they're currently using.
Right.
So I'm just trying to make myself aware of the alternatives for making that available to them without, doing a one-off.
Right.
From our point.
Right. Okay, and so that's a good point. we've had some discussions. Were you in the discussion we had, like, I think on Monday, on how do we deal with things that are hard to package and keep up to date?
No.
Because there's a server team discussion on that. I'm also active in server team.
Okay.
And we have stuff like, for example, like Memcached, the versions we have in some previous releases are nothing you would ever want to use now.
Okay.
And so the question is, how do we get those updates to users? And really, Backports is a good, place for that. And so, and that's something that we want to, in the server context, we want to be more mindful of. For example, about a week before release, we removed Drizzle from Maverick because the version that we had was broken, and they're coming out with a beta. They were hitting beta like a week after our release. So whatever we shipped would immediately be obsolete. And so for Drizzle, the answer for right now was, yeah, use a PPA, because it didn't make sense to ship something. But once we get Drizzle into, get the beta into Natty, it's very easy to do a backport into Maverick and Lucid so that people who want to start working with Drizzle on their Ubuntu server releases and experimenting with it can do it. That's very easy to do within this process.
What would be really awesome from a testing standpoint is to abuse the AWS trial stuff for testing purposes.
Yeah, absolutely. Just keep registering for new Launchpad IDs.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're on the internet.
Damn recordings.
Did I say that out loud?
And has there been any previous instance where you used put a kernel driver in Backports?
No, see, kernels are different because there is a Linux kernel backports
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
package that is updated through the updates process.
Drivers would be hard to backport separately from the kernel just because of the way that kernel modules are tied to ABI version numbers and stuff
Right.
like that.
And right, and so yeah.
But what about drivers that are delivered with DKMS? Could we backward those?
Potentially. That's the kind of thing we'd have to look at on a case-by-case basis and see what the risk-benefit was.
Right.
Because drivers are always difficult because most driver changes that fix things for one subset of the user base break things for another subset of the user base. I mean, that's just, now, the ratios of those two groups vary considerably depending on the type of driver, and so there may be some that's appropriate.
As long as we can enable backports only for few packages for users, we shouldn't really.
Yeah, probably not, because right now if you did it, then everybody who had that driver
Exactly.
installed would get the thing. I guess one other thing to mention is when there are problems with backported packages, those are most often filed against the Ubuntu package for that. And it's really not an Ubuntu bug.
Shouldn't we extend upwards to make a distinction?
Yeah, that would be useful. But the thing is, Apport really isn't the primary source, I don't think, because Apport's turned off by default at release.
But what about like the Ubuntu bug script or whatever?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, maybe. Yeah, that would be
I mean,
useful.
the other piece, to the extent that we can automatically detect those things, that's always good as well.
Right.
Because if they embed the version number, and I know that Ubuntu bug embeds the version number right at the top of the bug.
Right.
It does.
So.
What you really want is a launchpad to have proper version tracking.
Oh, gee, wouldn't that be nice?
Wouldn't that feel lovely?
Yeah.
We should use deadlocks.
No, we shouldn't.
It is one area where it's clearly superior.
Yeah.
One area, yes.
Yeah. The fact that it's harder to find a bug is also a feature in my.
I have a Debian box that I use specifically for running report bug.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, because we have enough bugs, we don't need more. But, okay. So I guess who's interested in becoming an Ubuntu backporter? Okay. You two Motu already, right? You're working on it.
Oh, no. Us three.
You are?
I am.
Oh, right.
No,
Oh, I thought you were.
not yet.
Oh, okay,
No.
all right. So you two are working on it, right?
He's closer.
Right, so,
Just need to get 4 people in a room together.
Exactly.
right.
We have 2 IRC volunteers.
Who are you?
Already in Ubuntu.
Okay, and don't think I know you, what's your involvement in the project?
For Backport,
Or just in general?
some package in Universe, LXD package,
I'm sorry, which package?
LXD package,
Okay,
and some virus package.
okay, all right. Glad to have you, just don't know you, that's all, so just trying to figure out the two. George is gonna run before I make him introduce himself.
Okay, we have some interest from around the other side.
Yeah, so,
Glad I don't have to fix
What
this.
would be?
I mean,
aren't you a backporter already, Andrew?
So look.
Right, so it's an interesting idea for Lucid Backports obtaining package level reports. Andrew, do you know anybody who's played with Ubuntu development or Launchpad development who might be able to look at that? Because he has. Yeah, okay.
No, he's not in the backwards.
No, okay.
How many people there?
So, how many active people?
Right.
Out of these people, how many are vaguely active?
And I'm only vaguely active.
Yeah.
I see.
So, yeah, basically the level of attention I've been able to put on this is when people ping me for backport, I'll process it. I don't look at the backport bug list very often.
Yeah.
And we could do more with this if there were more people. We have 5 minutes left. Anything of great interest to people?
Have a look at the actions, see if everyone's happy with them.
Okay.
So there's AJ Mitch to investigate tools similar to requesting backports, Ubroda to investigate tool for automatically testing backports, and Scott Kay to take early opening of backports proposal to tech board.
Right.
members.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's it.
What about actions for us to become closer to joining the team?
Right. Well,
What?
right. So for those of you who are Motu already,
Yeah.
take a look at the backports bugs. And remember, we have backports projects all the way back to Dapper that are still open. You don't have to look at them all, but have a look. Feel free to give people feedback about what they need to do to get the backport approved. And if you see one that's ready, just give me a ping. And once we've been through a couple cycles of, yeah, I think that looks good, you're in. Those of you who are not yet Motu, that are interested in becoming Ubuntu backporters, there's no reason you can't do the same thing so that as soon as you're a Motu, I can add you to the team.
Right.
So the requirement to be Motu is, I think, kind of interesting. It's actually relatively recent because the guy who founded Backports only became a developer like a year or two ago. So as soon as he was a developer, then we had that requirement. We really should have it all along.
Well, it is an official part of Ubuntu, so it does make sense that
Yeah.
everyone who uploads there should be an Ubuntu developer,
Right.
and even part of Motu.
Yeah. Any more questions?
So should I start filing backport requests instead of actually backporting my own packages for certain things?
When you say backporting your own packages, what do you mean?
Well, I have backports PPA.
Yeah, if we can put your Backports PPA out of business, that would be great.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like that.
Uh-huh.
Other people could
Yeah, I know you cringed when I said Dapper Backports, but up to day before yesterday, for example, when ClamAV did a new release, you could get current ClamAV out of Dapper Backports.
Which is laudable. I, however, personally cannot stand Dapper.
I don't run it anymore either, but
By the
Yeah.
way, wouldn't something like Debian Volatile be better for ClamAV? or are we just out of resources to create another?
But right. So the thing is, Backports serves both purposes that volatiles and Backports serves in Debian, because the real difference between Backports and volatile is that Backports can only come from the next stable release. So you don't backport, essentially you backport from testing, whereas volatile can come from unstable. It comes from unstable.
Does backport sloppy allow? I think backport sloppy might allow that.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah,
The backward
yeah,
swap
but
rules have more to do with rules around the upgrade path from the current stable to the
right,
next
right.
stable.
The difference there was you had to be able to upgrade backports to the next stable without the next backports enabled.
So you had to be able to upgrade from Etch plus Etch backports to Lenny without Lenny backports.
Right. Whereas sloppy just meant you had to have Lenny backports too. That's actually more like we do, where we do multiple release backports to make sure there's a smooth upgrade path. So we kind of do it that way already. But our problem, as far as that goes, is much more complex than Debian, because Debian never has more than 2 releases they're supporting at once. Whereas, we have, 5? So. All right.
Good.
I'll give you a minute back. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the
Thank
background.
you.
It was all right.
Yes, you should also push for the sync button and launchpad.
What's that?
The sync from Debian button and launchpad, because that also slows down the amount of time,
Right.
between getting something from packaged in Debian to a backwards object.
Right, so the archive admin resources are a blocker in making this whole process fast in a couple of places. Right now, that's one of them. It would be really nice if there were also a do the backport button that did the same thing.
Right.
So that, because really the archive admin role in doing a backport is really mechanical, about having to run a shell script on, I can't remember the name of the machine that you had to run it on inside the canonical data center. It's really, the approval is in the Ubuntu backport state. And so if there was a button to do the same thing in Launchpad, then we could really do a lot to make the process work faster, because the guys who are the most time limited, we just take them out of the process.
Right.